Thank you for having me here. I'm Rejo Zenger and I work as a privacy advocate with Bits of Freedom, the leading Dutch digital civil rights organization. And we are working on protecting civil rights like freedom of expression and privacy, mostly within the realm of digital communications and the internet. And I was invited here to speak about designing freedom. And although now I'm working as a privacy advocate, I have done my study as an industrial product designer. I don't think I have taken a lot from that study with me now, but there's one important thing that I did, which is as a designer, I think you can have a large influence on, you can have a large impact on the people you are working for, you are designing for. And I will try to explain that in this talk. This is Marshall McLuhan, because that idea of the impact that a designer has is not a new idea. It's something which he, amongst others, has explained very well a long time ago already. In the 60s, he did lengthy interviews with magazines like Playboy that were like pages of text. It surprises me. And he has had a couple of ideas which are still very current for today. One of those is technology is the extension of man. And what he meant with this is that technology is enabling people in doing stuff. Think of a gas pedal of a motorist. It enables him steering the car, driving faster. Think of it as the knife for a butcher. And in that way, technology is extension of man. On the other hand, sometimes maybe it's a shortener of man, but that's another thing. Another idea of him is the medium is the message. And that is also very important. Think of when you are sitting in the evening in front of your television with a plate of pasta on your lap and you're watching the news. And the news will show you horrible videos from Syria or some earthquake somewhere, and those images maybe disturb you. But Marshall McLuhan says that's not the most important thing. Not the fact that you are disturbed by those images from an earthquake, but the fact that the television made it possible that it happened is the important fact of this. So the medium, the devices, the technology itself, the fact that it is there is already changing a lot. And then he says you have figure and ground. And with that he meant people always tend to think about the positive short-term effects of technology and tend to forget the long-term, sometimes more negative effects of technology. Take, for example, a car. A car was brought to us as something which would liberate people, which would enable people to travel so you don't have to travel with others like in a train. Any distance is reachable for you, there's no problem anymore. And that is, of course, is true. But the other side of this, of the car, is that it limited us a lot, because lots of people travel from their home to the works on a daily basis, but are in a traffic queue, in a traffic jam. And this part that people started to live further away from their work and had to travel longer distances because they had a car, that they ended up in being in a traffic jam. They didn't tell you that when they started with the car. So we always tend to see the short-term positive effects, but we always tend to forget the long-term, sometimes more negative effects of technology. Another thinker is Loris Lessig. You probably know him, I guess. He has written a book which is named Code is Law, and that in that book he says computer code regulates conduct in much the same way that legal code does. He talks about the East Coast law, the East Coast Code, which refers to Washington, where you have legal code which influences what people are allowed to do. But he also says, on the other side, on the west end, you have the valley, and then you have all kinds of computer code, which also have an impact on how people behave. In fact, he says there are 4 major regulators. There's laws, norms, market, and architecture. You can simply explain this by using the example of a cigarette. You are not allowed to smoke a cigarette in certain public places. It's not okay if I would blow the smoke into your face, because that's a norm. Then there's market, which also says something about the availability of cigarettes. And then there's architecture. Nicotine in cigarettes is addictive, and that's why people are smoking it a lot, and it's hard to get off from the cigarettes. That is also the last thing, the architecture. That's something which you will see with technology as well. In France, you had very, very small streets for a long, long time, and that made it very easy for rebels to fight a large army, even if those rebels were when it comes to a number of people or a number of artillery and stuff, even if they are outnumbered by a large army. So the rebels are able to use those small dwindling streets to barricade roads and to block access to the city. Napoleon III was clever, and he thought, okay, this is a problem for me. I can't win the city, so I will take down the city for large parts, rebuild it with broad avenues. And with those broad avenues we see today, it was very easy for a large army to defend such a city. This is a speed bump. A speed bump is placed on in a parking garage or in some other streets where there should be slow traffic. The speed bump will force a car driver to slow down. If he's going too fast, it will become a not very pleasant drive. So the speed bump forces the motorist to slow down. And it works the other way around as well. If you have a 10-lane wide road, you cannot have a speed limit of, say, 30 kilometers per hour, because everybody will just speed ahead and will go ahead. One nice example of that, of course, is the road between Amsterdam and Rotterdam. You have in one direction 5 lanes. Nobody will really drive slowly, even if the law tells you to do so. So why is this all relevant to freedom? I think that is because lots of those choices you make with technology have an impact on our freedom, on how we can behave, and what we are allowed to do. One example: a friend of mine was traveling, and he booked a hotel for one night in both Amsterdam and London. And because of that, his loyalty card from the Hilton Hotel was being put on hold. The computer said, hey man, you cannot stay one night in 2 different locations at once, so this is probably a fraud. What happened, in fact, was completely different. He was traveling from Amsterdam to London in the evening, wasn't sure whether his flight was going because there was bad weather conditions, so he booked a room in both hotels, so he was sure that he had a bed for the night. That's where something in the code denies the completely legitimate use of it, just because the code didn't really take into account all the edge cases there were. And of course, this code is written by people. More closer to my field of work, so to digital communications, of course, Edward Snowden. His leaks were showing that the NSA was using all kinds of attacks on digital infrastructure, which were maybe already, they were talked about by hackers, but nobody really believed all those attack vectors were used. One of the things which I found very interesting about those NSA leaks is that it shows that the NSA is using every possible avenue to get to your data, not just one, not to exploit only one, but exploit any route there is. This slide is explains that as well. This slide is is from one of those NSA slides, and it says, well, it explains how the internet works for Google. On the left-hand side, you have the interface between the user and Google, and all of that is encrypted. But Google didn't encrypt everything, that all the data flows in their own data centers, which is on the right-hand side. So the NSA looked at the network infrastructure of Google, noticed, hey, within the Google infrastructure itself is not encrypted, so they attacked that part of the communication. And this shows that even if you have end-to-end encryption between the user and the provider, it still doesn't mean a thing if you don't have encryption in all of the parts. President Obama responded to the NSA leaks, and he said, there are fewer and fewer technical constraints on what we can do, and that places a special obligation on us to ask tough questions about what we should do. And that's about ethics, I think. This does not only apply to the intelligence services of the US, it doesn't only apply to Barack Obama, I think it applies to all of us. So now what? Let me give you a few examples of fairly small examples which everyone can start doing today or tomorrow. First of all, don't ask for details you don't need. Obvious one, I think. For example, if you have a Spotify account, if you have a Pro account, then you pay those 10 euros a month, then you are required to provide your birth date. I don't understand why, because any date I fill in this case it's just the 1st of January in 2001, but any date the service will just work. Spotify doesn't need it to provide the service, but they still ask for it. I think that's a bad habit. The same goes for Facebook. Of course, if you have data of people, then you need to be transparent about it. This is a printout from a dump of a Facebook profile, which Facebook sent to a user, which asked for a complete overview of all the data that Facebook of this user had. Such requests are usually denied. In this one case, I think Facebook made a mistake and they actually did send the data. And what it shows is that the messages that this person was sending and later on he deleted, they aren't actually deleted in the system of Facebook. They are just marked as being deleted and then no longer shown to the user. If you provide a delete button on a website, for example, then that delete button should actually delete stuff instead of hide it. One other thing is you don't have others spy on your users. Most of you, I'm pretty sure, if you are building a website, you will implement Google Analytics to make sure so you can tell how the people are using the website. But if you are using Google Analytics, then of course it's Google who can track your users, not only you. And as Google has a fairly large market penetration, Google can track the user not only on your website but on all the other websites as well, and they have a lot amount of valuable information. But you don't have to. You don't need to have Google spy on your users. You can use other platforms like in Piwik, which can be self-hosted. So if you do that self-hosted, then you still have more or less the same information about your users while not having Google spy on users as well. Same goes for the social media buttons. If I'm reading a blog article, then there's no need for Facebook to know that I'm reading it. But in most cases, how the Facebook buttons are implemented, there are some elements that are loaded from Facebook, and Facebook can track me as a user as well. And there are several solutions to that. There are several ways on how you can have, if you want to have them, to have the Facebook share button on your website while not having we're not needing to load the Facebook code right away. And then it's usable when a user thinks it is. It's not usable because you say it is. There are so many products out there right now which says we do secure communications. but secure communication doesn't mean a thing if there are no users to it. To give you one example, this is the interface of the key management of PGP. And PGP is used for end-to-end encryption in email. So if I'm sending you an email, and then that message is encrypted on my computer, is sent to you, and then decrypted on your computer, and no one in between can read the message. But that only works because it's a public-private key system. I'm not going into details, but you need to have some key management. And this is the interface that was used for PGP back in the 80s or 90s. It looks horrible, it works horrible. That was the conclusion of a research that was done in the 90s, a very famous paper named Why Johnny Can't Encrypt, and it's a usability evaluation of PGP. And it notes, because of the interface, people think they are sending an encrypted message, but they are not really encrypting it. They send their secret key to the others. They do all kinds of stuff which is not okay, which is not meant to be. So remember how this interface looks. That was in the 90s. That was in the 90s when there was this research. And now how the interface looks today. It's more or less the same. It's more or less the same interface, but with added colors and added buttons. I don't think that's the answer to the problem. And of course, that's all fairly low-hanging fruit. There is much more difficult issues to think about. If you're traveling in Amsterdam on a bike, that's the only way of travel in Amsterdam, I think. If you go from, for example, the Westerpark to the Oosterpark, you don't know how to get there, then you can use Google Maps. But Google Maps will route you around the grachtengordel instead of through the grachtengordels. And there are many reasons why that may be the case. I don't know which is the reason, but I think maybe it's too hard for Google to show on a phone all the directions, because then you need to left and right and over the bridge and left. It may be a very, very long list of directions, and that's what they want to avoid, so they send you around the grachten. But maybe there's another reason. Maybe it's too difficult for Google. I don't think so, but maybe it is. Or maybe there's even another reason. Maybe the people who are living in the grachten already see too many bikes a day, and they've asked Google to send people around the grachten if possible. We don't know, and I think that's a very big problem, because this will also impact all kinds of other stuff, like if you're driving from A to B, maybe some area is too dangerous, and Google wants to make you safe travel and routes you around that area, and that area only gets even more lost, I think. And then this one, another one from Google, but this applies to all technology, of course. I thought it was well known, but maybe it wasn't. So you see the image in the middle, in the center down, where the face of a woman is depicted as a gorilla. Of course, that's algorithm, but the question is, how would you avoid this? And I don't have an answer to that, apart from maybe one thing, that is to start with diversity. And just, well, have a look around you. I think maybe diversity would be a thing here as well. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Now the most important thing, question everything. Thank you.